Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm Deb Philman, your host, and I have a great show for you today. Today, I have John H. Wilson III with us to talk about what happens when math education gets political. John, if you're not familiar with him, it became the full-time Education and Enrichment Program Director in 2006 at West Angeles Church after earning his BS in electrical engineering from George Washington University. He had a 20-year career as an aerospace engineer and years of volunteer work at his church and community. Under his direction for over 2 decades, EEP has grown from modest math tutoring sessions to a noteworthy educational program that has provided year-round enrichment opportunities to thousands of youth, mostly non-members, from over 50 middle and high schools across Los Angeles County and serving more than 600 families. From 2004 until now, through his vision and work, over 2,000 youth in LA and Long Beach area have attended an affordable college. And over this time, John has developed an expertise for admission, enrollment, financial aid, and many other details of college access process. So we're talking to an expert today on, yes, you are, on math education, in particular on remediation and helping kids who need that extra help, okay? And also helping them make sure they take it all the way. They want to go to college, they go to college. So I'm really excited to have you here today with us because there is a lot I want to help educate my audience about. And welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Great. So let's first talk about why you do what you do. Like how you went from aerospace engineering to here. Help me understand this transition and how what brought that about.
Well, actually, coming from a family of educators, I was an engineer who didn't know he was an educator. So as I look back on it,
Oops,
uh,
wrong ticker.
all
I was
right,
supposed
great.
to be this one. I hit the wrong one.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
As an engineer, yeah, I worked in aerospace for, oh boy, from 1980 to 19, actually, whoa, you could really say to 2006. So I was in parts of aerospace for 20 to 25 years. And I figured out that I was really created to be an educator because even in engineering, I love working with the new engineers that came in, and I love the excitement of talking to students in my church who were going to college and high school, and I realized that there was a deficit in math education. But we'll get to that later.
Right.
This has been around for a while in the area of math, and it just became obvious I should volunteer first, and then things went down in my career that pushed me this direction. Uh, and I left my aerospace job. It's crazy. I tried 3 times. The third time it took. I was born up in a family of educators, and so I knew the importance of education was in my genes. And I can
Mhm.
see at key moments in my life I turned away from education, even though I knew I was good at it in college. I was tutoring, etc. And I realized that that's why I was here. What I was here to do. And I
Mhm.
ended up going full time. I was fortunate to be in a church and with a pastor that believed a ministry should be education to youth. He believed it was like you have evangelism, you have, you know, the various other worship, you have all. He believed that that should be a discipline,
Mhm.
educating our youth and getting them into college affordably. And so
Mhm.
I volunteered first, and they brought me on staff full time, raised a lot of eyebrows. That's another whole story. People thought it's not a ministry. Why is he here? I got to tell you, more than ever before, I know it is. Even just working in the community, I feel that way, as well
Mhm.
as really helping people to get better in their lives. So that's what drove me toward it. And then as I got into it, I saw confirmations every day, misconceptions among even in our black community, how we teach youth, and saw the different agendas people had and realized that youth were getting messed over,
Mhm.
and they would not learn. They were coming to me with the same kinds of issues, having homework they weren't taught about, totally deficient in things they should have learned years ago, and students who have just given up on math. And I realized they could not be functional in society without even a very basic side of math. Even if they were liberal arts majors or
Mhm.
whatever, they needed to have enough math to get through that institution. And then I saw there were no STEM jobs, no pre med for black students, brown students, some inner
Mhm.
city students, of even white students. I saw in the inner city that were suffering as well. And I said, this is where I need to be, and I would
Right.
never turn back now for anything.
And You mentioned you saw, even when you were just still in your engineering career, you saw a deficit. You saw people coming in, then you also were encountering students. You're like, wait, there's something missing here. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like what did that look like? And how did
Oh,
you notice it?
somebody just asked me that the other day. One of my current contract tutors is kind of funny. Asked me a similar question. I thought about that question. Why did you ask that? I, what I saw was the most strangest thing. I saw students that are coming to get help with their homework. I said, "Show me your notes." And but this was public school mostly, but also private school. So I was really alarmed at that. And I look at their notes, and the notes didn't even touch what they were trying to do for homework. And I said, well, maybe it's just that the kids didn't pay attention. And I sat there, Deb, for about 6 months telling my workers. I had this really sharp tutor named Miss Pope. I shout out to Miss Pope. She's amazing. She's still in the LA area. She probably crack up if she sees this video. That's okay. That's okay. I love you, Miss Pope. Anyway, she said, "Nah, Deacon, I don't know about that. I think they're not being taught." So we both wondered, and it kept going on. And then we figured out, we need a whole series of ways that we teach certain things. We started calling the West Angeles method,
Mm-hmm.
that we could quickly use the homework to show them concepts. And lo and behold, Deb, they got good grades. And we
Lo
said,
and
oh my
behold,
goodness.
imagine that.
And this was way back.
Yeah.
Man, this was so far back, you wouldn't believe it. This was like 2000, 1999. I'm learning that and I'm going, oh my goodness. And then we learned, well, I'll tell you what, this is Deb. In the summer, we decided, well, our students are all failing chemistry and biology. They all were failing. It just every student I would see was failing biology and geometry. And I said, we can't tolerate that. We're in the summer, we're going to cheat. We're going to teach them the topic before they get to it. And imagine this, Deb, got to the midpoint, said, we ought to collect data. We collected data and they all had B, A, B, A. Oh, we got to have a summer program. So that after school program became a summer program, all because we were learning that they weren't getting it in school. Now, we can sit up here and argue why, but there was something missing in the instruction. Then I began to read books and understand that math teachers weren't learning how to teach math, and this nation was falling behind in math anyway. And there was a correlation there, and I think it was a positive correlation. Not one of these just happened to be. And I realized that maybe the teachers just aren't sure how to teach it. And then when I started bringing in teachers for my summer program, Deb, something amazing happened. That by the third summer, I think we were still associated with one of the local universities at that time. But something strange happened. When I would try to get an accredited teacher to teach it, I was having more trouble with the students learning in the summer. But when I would hire people who were good communicators, I hired a guy who was an actor but went to Harvard or he went to Yale, and he was a physics and a theater major. And the way he taught the students wasn't even accredited. I said, well, maybe that's something to do. Then I noticed the effect I was having. And I'm really an engineer. And so I noticed, oh, enrichment is different than teaching because they don't enrich in the classroom. And that's why the Education and Enrichment Program, the name we have. So that's what I found out in the summers, Deb, that was quite astounding, way back to early 2000s. So by the time I get to 2005, I'm starting to see the effect of them trying to go to college and not
Sure.
knowing math. That's another
Mm.
whole subject maybe we'll get into later. I realized I was on to something.
Right. So it sounds like what I'm hearing you saying is that they weren't really teaching the math or the biology or the chemistry or so they
Anything related to it, applied math, whatever.
right, anything related to it. And so probably there are people in the audience, their parents who are thinking like, well, then what were they doing? Like what were they doing
great,
during
great
that
question.
class time?
Great question. Great question. So what I determined they were doing was they were showing them a couple of things. There were these teachers that, well, in the old days, it was that they were showing them things. They were like putting problems on the board, and there was no component where the student would try to do it in front of them, or so they could learn the types of problems. Like there's a certain, like if you're teaching factoring, for example, I know in my mind right away there's certain problems most kids are going to have, and I'm kind of like sitting there thinking about it while I'm showing them. And then when they start to work it, I go, here's what you're thinking. This is what it should be. And I don't think they get enough of that kind of critical thought by a teacher to adjust to the student. And so they're just putting stuff on the board and telling the parents, I taught them. And the students feel like, and the stuff they put on the board, they just follow examples in the book. There's not a real understanding of it. And so then they do get to the test, they give the test that the book publisher says to give, and there's disconnect. And the students just get so upset about, but by fourth and fifth, or by the time they get to algebra, they so much hate math, they can't believe it.
So you hate things you don't feel good at.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, why would you like it, right?
Yeah,
it
so
makes you feel bad about yourself.
Yeah, so ironically, we probably, one place where we all can agree, if you look at it politically or whatever, I bet we all can agree that something needs to be better.
Yeah.
But the difference is in what I say it should be, what people like me and my buddies in our Save Math group and some other places, what we think it should be. We think it should be, don't give up on real good classroom learning. Don't change the rules and say they have to learn less, or we have to cover other things because they're so weak as individuals or so oppressed. Let's not go there. Let's go there to assuming they can do it if we give them the right tools. But that's what I'm sure we'll get to that later.
Yeah. Well, no, but I mean, that's just such an important thing for people to just start off understanding, is that there are teachers and there are assigners, is what I would call them. So people like, this is your assignment. And maybe they put them towards something in a Chromebook and say, do these problems through this application or follow the directions to do it. Like, that person's an assigner. They're not really a teacher. A teacher does what you described, where you're anticipating mistakes because you've taught it before. You kind of know the typical mistakes the kids make, and you're thinking ahead and saying, now you might think you do it this way, but let me show you some other examples. And you might even do this old fashioned thing that was done to me when I was a kid, was come on up to the board.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Come on up.
That's what
let's do it together.
That's what I missed with this. We were online for our enrichment program last 2 summers. You're so right. That is such a weapon, especially if a loving teacher is there with them.
Right.
They're gently guiding them, correct them. That's wrong. Let me show you how. And by the way, there is a wrong answer in math. Sorry about that, anybody.
Yeah, that too.
There are actually wrong answers. You don't say, oh, you're right, but here's what no, it's wrong. Students need to hear that.
It doesn't mean they're wrong. Like, I think people are, and I want to get to that in a second about, like what people are projecting onto these kids. But, I'm thinking back, just, I hate to personalize everything, but just thinking back to when I was a kid, I wasn't as upset about getting it wrong as I was about not understanding how to do it right. I figured I'd get it wrong, right? You weren't expecting to get it right the first time, second time, even sometimes the 10th time. But as long as you felt like I did better today than I did yesterday, like, this is a positive thing. And I just, like I said, I just want people in the audience to understand the difference between teaching and presenting or assigning, because what it feels like is there's a fair amount of that assigning thing going on and not as much teaching. And it sounds like in your estimation, a fair amount of that can be attributed to teachers not being taught how to teach math, that like teaching math is a skill in and of itself.
Yeah, you're right. I boy, that opened up something I want to say here now, is that it's always been okay, Deb, to use culture to teach math. Mm-hmm. But when it becomes cultural math, it's a problem. In other words, using examples that can relate to this. I do it in little short bursts too. The other night, I always keep some pro bono students I work with, no matter how much of a director I am. Don't believe that title. I try to always have a few. And 2 students I have now, I love to say, like they say, I'll say, what's 3 minus 10? And I realize it's -7. And if they go 7, I go, wait a minute. You owe me you owe me 3, right?
Yeah.
You owe me $3. Or I guess this example I love to use is your -3 minus 10 is -13. And they'll always say 7 or whatever. And I'll say, no, you owe me 3, I owe you 3, then I owe you 10 more. How much I owe you? And right away, they always say 13.
Right.
Oh, see, -13. Oh, they go, oh yeah, you're right. So I've always thought about culture as a tool, now that not being the thing I use to help their self-image. Deb, we have to do that.
Right. Well, Culture, I mean, people hear the word culture and they automatically box it into some kind of an identity box instead of
Right.
realizing that, like, when you're talking about money, we all use money.
Hey,
There's
hey.
nothing there's nothing like a specific to one ethnicity or a race or anything about money. So, and it's funny you mention it because I used to jokingly say that to my parents because I would struggle with math and my dad would put dollar signs in front of stuff and then I'd get it.
Oh,
And
oh
then
yeah, yeah, yeah.
suddenly I'd be
Absolutely,
like, "Oh, I get it now."
absolutely. Shout out to my oldest daughter when she was going to. She went to exclusive school on the west side of town here. Shout out to them. I won't call their name, but uh, and she couldn't do math. It was like it was water, Deb. She fell off a boat. She wouldn't hit water. She just could not do math.
I
Then I
can
had a
relate.
teacher, and this is a at the time, Deb, a $28,000, $30,000 private school. You over there in the East Coast, you would know the school if I said it. Anyway, and I went to have a conference with her math teacher. I remember the lady's name. She's a nice lady. Oh, just the nicest lady. She was such a nice lady, so sweet lady, and she was pretty smart, And but it was evident 2 minutes into my conversation with her that she'd given up on my daughter. Your daughter. I said, well, what do you do? How do you teach that? And I realized, oh shoot, she's not really teaching. I can take care of that. So I did it, and I got her over it. She got a B in algebra 2. It did only the math she needed. She's a great writer and a great speaker to this day, and she's very successful in her career. But I learned from that. I said, wow. And all I did with her was do the things I just talked about, related it to her everyday life. And usually parents can't teach their kids math, so I was really worried.
Mhm.
I found some people in the community. Miss Pope, as a matter of fact, was helpful with her as
Mhm.
well. Uh, so anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that we got to watch teachers for that. Parents, when you talk to them, listen to what their approach is to your child. Is there a sense of giving up? This is a very expensive school, and she was probably a well-paid teacher. I hadn't thought about that. She probably was
Mhm.
very well-paid. So there's something that stretches across in this math business.
Right.
There are probably other subjects, but I haven't thought a lot about it. Definitely math and the applied sciences, applied math.
Well, it could be something as simple as the fact that when you are skilled in a technologically advanced society and you have math ability and you have good communication skills and understand the applied aspects of it,
Mhm.
there are jobs you can get that are a lot more lucrative than teaching.
Yes.
And they're, where you have better working conditions. I mean, in other words, like the incentive isn't quite there to go be a math teacher. So the best and the brightest in that field aren't necessarily going to go and do it unless they feel like, as you did, like it's a calling. This is what I want to do with my life. And you'll always have a certain percentage. They're just a very small percentage. And so that could have something to do with it. So maybe we need to do better job of making it easier for people who have these talents to teach.
Oh,
And I don't mean
absolutely.
pay more. I mean,
Right.
make the process
Make,
of becoming a
that's right.
teacher
That's right.
much easier and less time consuming, expensive, and all these other things, so that that reward is there. If I've got to jump over a bunch of hurdles to get my degree and I have school debt and all these other kind of things, yeah, of course I'm going to take the more lucrative job. So, right. But I do want to also get back to when we talk about the difference between teachers and assigners.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, let's help the audience if you could to understand what might they see
Oh,
going
good.
into
I'm so glad.
today's classroom
So glad.
where they're doing math in this new way, not the
Hmm.
way that like you guys do in your program, but in a typical public school, kid comes into math class, like
Hmm.
what are parents missing that's happening there?
Yeah. So I would look for the symptom first. The obvious symptom is, and a lot of them they come to me with the symptom, but sometimes they don't. And they assume, well, the symptom is they get all this math homework, they can't do it.
Right.
Or they just start, oh, let me start with the one that's obvious. They start failing tests, right?
Mhm.
And they find out there's two cases there. Oh boy, they haven't been doing their homework. And then if they dig a little deeper, the student says, well, I can't do it. So they say, get a tutor. And tutors are interesting because remember, a tutor might be different than an enricher. A tutor might just want to get the homework done and doesn't look for those signs of weakness that can be made whole while they're doing the homework. And that's a subtle difference there. And then they get the tutor and it still doesn't get better. That's when you got to talk to the teacher.
Okay.
And you might find out some things. I think what you look for is, what does a typical class look like? What do you do in class? Do they get to go to the board? Do they show you what they're doing? Do you correct? Simple thing like this, I found. This is amazing, Deb. Do you correct the homework and give the students feedback? I cannot. Let me control myself. I cannot. I forgot that I didn't like this. If my wife has seen it, she's going, "How come you waited so long to do this, honey? I'm not perfect." All right. This annoys me to no end. It annoys me to no end. They'll turn in homework. It's never corrected or handed back,
Right.
and they get a test. I have never understood that.
Right.
Now you see that more in public school.
Right.
I cannot believe that they're not giving the students feedback. If it was me and I got homework back from a student and it was all screwed up, I would look at me first, and then I would get in partnership with the parent before I even give it back to the student.
Right.
Because they're telling you, students are telling you they're going to fail the test. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say in the case of my kids, the last time they were in public school, and now they're not, they're out, but they're in a private situation like homeschool. But they were assigned homework online even before COVID. They were assigned things on like IXL and things like that. And it would sort of score it for them. It would say like, you got this many, right? But there was still no understanding. And my daughter was like, I don't even know which ones I got wrong. And I don't know why I got them wrong. She just said, all I'm supposed to do is do it. And so she thought she was really bad at math and walked around for years. I mean, till, 6th grade saying, I'm just bad at math. I don't know math. And then when
I wish I'd met her.
Right. And then she got into this new program where they have actual, even though ironically, the whole program, the whole school is online. There's no building to go to, but there's an instructor, there's a teacher, and they use like an online whiteboard. And it's like, you might as well be in a classroom. And this time now she's getting like a 98 in math.
Imagine that.
And she's doing so much better. And I still don't think she considers herself like a great math student, but she can work for it. She now feels like, I know how to take notes and do it because the teacher is actually teaching it. And even she still has little complaints about how he explains stuff, but she's like, well, at least he tries to explain it. At least I'm getting explained. And that's what I'm trying to get across to parents, is that some kids are going to class and it's a self-directed situation. The kids are almost expected to teach themselves how to do the homework.
It's a lot of that.
And parents have no idea.
They have no idea. That. There's so much of that going on. That's the other side of the problem I just mentioned, where they don't correct it. They'll like teach the lesson and go, well, this other part they can do at home. If I found myself in a time bind with that, I've seen it in the summer. I said, gosh, I got to teach this whole thing. I'll teach the hardest parts in the class. But if I have to send home homework, it's the easy ones.
Right.
And I find I have no problem. They can then, if they do it, teach themselves.
Well, homework ought to be the practice, no?
Yes, it ought to be the practice of what you've done, of concept you've learned. This seems so basic, Deb, but I'm seeing that that's not happening right now in some classroom here in Long Beach, LA. That's not happening. And it's hard for parents to detect that unless they ask, are they getting feedback on homework? Well, why did, this one really drives me crazy. They'll take a test, Deb, and they won't do well. They collect the test back. And so I can't, as an enricher, see what the student got wrong in evaluating their ability to do better. I can't actually see what was wrong on the test. They're afraid for me to see it. It's amazing how that happens.
And the person least capable of telling you what they need is the kid.
They don't know. I don't know, Mom. I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. And it gets what then happens is the kid gets really frustrated, and this turns into other problems. So I want to talk about that a little bit, because what we hear a lot in the news media, and you get it from certain educators who are selling on whether it's like the new framework, for example, the new draft framework, which we could talk about in a bit, is you get a lot of sort of diagnoses of the problem that lay the problem at the feet of society,
Right.
the culture, the family, the student, like every place but the teaching methodology, like every place but the way they've been doing it for the last 20, 30 years.
Right.
And when it comes to minority students in particular, what you hear a lot is it's because of racism. They'll just
Yeah.
straight up say, like, draw a straight
Yes.
line to this concept called racism and say,
Yes.
racism in the school. And if
Yes.
you point blank them and say, well, what do you mean? Like, give me, like, tactically, what form does that
They
take?
can't.
They'll say tracking, or they'll
Tracking.
say
Yeah.
ability tracking. Okay. So either they'll say nothing and they just say it's this, like, this hidden vapor that's in the air that
Or they'll
just
tell you it's just systemic. They can't prove it. They can't show
exactly.
you examples. It's just there.
It's just there.
Yeah.
And
I hear it
that
all
kind
the
of
time.
permeates everything. And the problem is if you try to question that, of course, that's just proving that you are racist, right? And yet you
Okay.
want evidence. Like, I'm an evidence girl. I'm just like, hey, I hate racism is evil. So if you can show me where it lives and what it looks like, I'll fight it with you. I'll stand right there with you and fight it. But if you can't even show me the size and shape and scope of it, how am I fighting it? What am I doing?
Well, this is a place I'm really passionate about. Isn't it interesting, though? And I do want to hit that head on. But isn't it interesting that the homework issue we brought up that you slid into just now?
Yeah.
And I heard what you said, and I actually wrote a note about it already here. Let me make sure I make sure. Go ahead, because you triggered a couple of ideas there. You'll hear this all the time among the so-called educational policy experts. They'll say, well, the problem is we have too much homework. See, they know about the problem I spoke of, so they
Yeah.
cut down on the homework, and we can't expect them to do so much because you remember that race component inherently says, don't you all know that Black and brown students are oppressed and they can't do as much as their white counterparts? So we've got to make it easier for them to succeed. And one way is to take away homework or have less testing. And these things are objective, and I won't go full bore right now. Actually, there's a term for that too. I'll keep that out of this for now. Oh, why not? They'll say that's evidence of whiteness if you have tests and metrics and objective standards.
I want to put a different word in there and see how it
I know.
sounds.
I'm just
No, let's just put in female. Let's just put, there's female, and they're oppressed in society, and we can't give them as much homework. Everyone instantly hears how offensive and insulting that is. But when you say Black and brown, it's like, oh yes, of course, and it's like, what?
Well, that is a very good point. And you mentioned the new framework, and I see it as an article that Joe Bowler wrote this morning, and I read the article. It's very interesting. The way she wrote, I kind of agreed. Again, we have an agreement that there is a problem. And she cited that in her life, she was told she couldn't do physics. And I said, I agree, that's a problem. But her solution is to make the standards different and to change the way they're evaluated. The solution is to get her a good teacher. Get her someone. Well,
and she even put in the article that
you saw it. Okay.
Yeah, what she put in the article that her solution when she had a minority student come to her, and this is in England, so tracking can be totally different, but she had a student come and say, oh, they weren't giving me good work, whatever. So she gave the student harder work, up the standards, and the student succeeded beautifully. And yet that's not the solution she's proposing for California.
Here. That's right. I saw that too. It's almost like the article seemed like she was saying it differently to get approval, and knowing this thing did the other thing. And I'm trying to keep this from being political, but she's not stating what she's implementing.
But she used a technique. I think it's important. And I'm glad you brought up this article because she used a technique that these policymakers, and we were talking about what happens when math education gets political. When you have people pushing a specific kind of pedagogy,
that's right.
Okay, they use a technique of asserting something, and yet you're waiting afterwards for the example. You're waiting for the evidence. So I'll give you
that.
Right. Yeah. So here's an example from her article. She'll say, the current system of mathematics teaching in the U.S. invites few students into the richness of thought of learning and ultimately of careers that mathematical understanding makes possible.
I remember that.
We blunt our children's possibilities nearly from the start, telling far too many of them at an early age that math isn't for them. And I, as a reader, am going, says who? When do we do this? How do we do this?
Let's hear that.
Show me that. How do you know? My question is for her. You've just made a pretty big allegation
That's
against
huge.
us. It's
That's huge.
huge. And then we just keep on going. She just keeps on going, brushes right past it, doesn't give you an example, doesn't tell you how she knows. And she does it for like 4 more paragraphs
Paragraphs, yeah.
and then jumps into her solution. And this is a common technique. I want the audience, parents, everybody to understand this, that when
Please
people,
listen to this.
this is literally the definition of propaganda. When somebody assertion, solution, you need to be saying, how do you know, compared to what? Show me.
Show me data, whatever. Yeah,
That's
show
it.
me examples, whatever.
Right. And then of course I'm looking in here and I'm thinking like, well, she even demonizes, like, we've been using the same math you're using from the 1800s and it served people brilliantly. We put a man on the moon. We've had a whole technological revolution with computers based in this country. So it was good enough for those couple hundred years. Why it suddenly is bad,
Yeah, she didn't
no
clearly
explanation.
say that. Right, no explanation of that. In fact, when she said that, I said, that's what I meant earlier when I said, I found myself going, yeah, okay, and?
Yep, exactly. So when they make these assertions and they don't give you some examples, you, the parent, if you're a new wannabe teacher, whatever, you should be saying like, how do you that's a big thing that you just said.
Yes.
Don't just keep going. And I know it's tempting because parents feel like, well, I'm not a teacher and they're the experts, or this person's a professor at Stanford.
Yeah, you're right.
You guys give yourselves more credit for your common sense. That's what I would say. You know your kid. You have a lot more common sense than you think. Don't discount that. That's very, very important. And if something seems like an extreme statement, demand evidence.
Yeah, I told a parent one time along those recently, about a year ago during the pandemic. I said, wait a minute, you're the designer, you're the builder. You don't let somebody tell you what's going on with your child. She said, oh, good point.
Exactly. And that's what Adrian mentions, the disparity fallacy. This goes to what we were talking about the myth that Black and brown kids, they can't have these high standards. We can't test them as much. We can't give them homework. It's this idea that because there's a disparity in the achievement, then that's evidence of discrimination that happened. It couldn't happen otherwise.
No.
And we need to change what's expected as opposed to how we do things.
Yes. Yeah, of course, with their world, what they want to do is change, make the ground easier for these disparate, quote, easier, or make it more into less dependent on the outcomes rather than getting it better their development and what's going on. Not looking on the front end. That's why I was telling somebody I love our program, because we have not given up on the front end of getting them ready to have good outcomes. That's why all of our students have good outcomes, or just about all of them, because we're working on that front end. We're not looking at the back. We're saying we want to get it, but we don't want you to make it easier. There's an old song, I think, Deb, I don't know if you heard me. I think the people in the group know about this. There's an old song by James Brown. I'm sure you know if you're my age. And it goes, I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Open up the door and I get it myself.
Yep.
That's all I'm saying as a Black community educator. I used to be scared to call myself that. But that's what I see. I've always thought of my job is to get them to that point, and the door will be open. Society has not said we don't want Black and brown, and that's a fallacy. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's true at all. And yet I love that. That's a good point that you made earlier about this, using this disparity.
Right. That's the evidence. It's like there's a disparity, must be racism. There could be 10 other reasons, right?
Lots of other things going on.
And I always come back to this one. And have you ever heard of Charles Love? He wrote a book called Race Crazy recently. It was a great book.
Oh, I looked that up. I didn't know about that.
He goes through a bunch of different, myths, talks about 1619 Project, a lot of different things. But
I know about that.
Yeah. So he's been on the channel a couple times, but he has a technique, and it's called giving them their argument. And so when I think about this issue, okay, even if I give them their argument that there has been historical systemic racism, in particular in the schools and so forth and so on, even if we do that, that does not justify this solution. Because
this particular solution, right?
Correct. Because these are brand new children. Okay, kid coming into kindergarten today. Whatever happened before and whatever was going on before, this is a brand new little brain, brand new little kid coming in the door today. today, you start today with this child. You don't approach them like you're fixing 50 years ago problem.
Right.
You need to address the little kid that's in front of you right now, who's just as capable of learning as any kid who's not black or brown. And for you to suggest otherwise makes you the perpetuator of the very thing you said you're trying to get rid of.
Yeah, they do that all the time. Yeah, they
They're
do
a
that all the
kid.
time. Yes.
And they're coming to you blank. Okay, they're kindergartner. They don't know anything. And so that's what bothers me is like, even if we gave them their argument that things were bad in the past and all the stuff, that doesn't explain why you're going with this. Let's dumb it down, let's ease it up, let's expect less. And because of oppression, like that feels to me like a kind of oppression. Why would you deny them access to the exact same level of
It is.
academic rigor
It
that
is.
you would give to anybody else?
And there are those, and I've in my rant said it at times too, that form of, uh, from the point of view of a black leader in the community, that form of attitude that we have in progressive, in some conservative circles, but usually it's progressive, that says that there's these poor little oppressed kids that we have to get them through any way we can, and we have to lower the standards for them, is a new, highly developed form of racism to me. And I don't like it, Deb. I'm sorry to be so strong. I don't like the way that sounds. That doesn't sound good to me.
No.
Doesn't sound good at all to me, assuming that. I never let my youth feel that way in our summer program or anywhere. You can do this. I've seen students come to me. You would not believe the problems they had, and they got to my people and how they're totally different, their function. I put students on my team that literally were math and reading illiterate and are now functioning and in society and in great careers. And it was our program. It's the looking at them after hours and getting them ready for that next course.
Right.
That's what we should be doing inside of the school, really.
Well,
we have this.
That's just it. See, I think of people like you, and I know there are others, right? It's like sprinkled around the country. There
Yes.
are John Wilsons, okay?
Yeah, that's
and doing this day in and day out, and it works, and it works, and it works. You have Project Hood in Chicago. You get the
I'm
things.
aware of that program.
I mean,
Yes.
you got things that work so beautifully, and what I don't understand is why the supposed experts that are so busy with all of their crafting and writing and everything, why they aren't just beating down
and theories too.
and theories, why they aren't beating down your door and being like, "Uncle," it's like, you do it. You're like, help us.
That's a good question. They actually have. We had. Because something got really much better. I can tell you how it was in the beginning, and that I know they'll hear this one day, and they'll probably crack up too. But I remember the California state system came to us back in 2008 with this totally, you should have seen it, totally African cultural approach to math. And me and Miss Pope, I said, Miss Pope, give him a chance now. Don't, I told you about her. We were like, by this time we had our realization. And they said, we're coming to you and as a consultant. Will this work? We said, absolutely not. They said, well, I guess you won't be in the program with us. Absolutely not. We're going to keep on with our summer program as we do it. But they came to me the next year through my pastor because they said, if we don't get West Angeles involved, then all the other churches won't come. You'll have autonomy, don't worry. And we said, all right, we'll do it, but we refused to do a lot of that other stuff. And it created a little tension. And eventually CSU redid the program to build it up the way we're discussing today. Yeah. And we're functioning members of that approach now. But it was terrible. I learned a lot in those days about this culturally relevant approach. And they called it at the time critical theory. So I knew. So when I saw it again later, I knew what it was. Where we're going to teach 2/3 of the class. I'd say half the class content, Deb, was cultural identity and cultural African culture stuff. And here's the thing that will crack you up. Because of our church, 1/3 of my students were Hispanic and white. I'm like, we're not doing that. We are not doing that. Period. They got upset. They refused to pay me 1 year. It became a real big blowout for the grant. They refused to pay us. But we didn't care because we were collecting fees anyway, so I made it a big deal. So anyway, the point is, that's a real problem. They do come to us, and they left very angry with me, the people who ran. And they talked about me, called some very not so nice things there that I won't get into right
So
now.
they come to you, but instead of coming with humility, they come to you and say, we're going to use you to implement our
That's
program.
right. And try to convert you when they said they weren't. So
And you know
there's that.
what's frustrating about that is that time and time again, you know, and I try to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're well-meaning, that they're just wrong, you know, like, but they actually they mean well, they're not self-serving, they're not trying to just make a buck. And then I hear stories like this, I'm like, you know, maybe I'm too nice, you know, because this sounds like people who are much more interested. It reminds me of a story Marva Collins told once
Uh,
about the unions coming into her school and trying to like catch her. Like, you're lying. You're making these kids memorize stuff and it's all fake. And they come in and they'd observe and everything. She's like, I'll teach you anything you want to know about how I do it, what I do. And instead of being excited that she was helping the kids who were throwaway, like the kids are like, we can't help them. They're losers. They're not going anywhere. And she had them being superior readers and superior students by the
right.
end of their time there. And after I heard that story, I was like, you people don't actually really care about these kids, do you?
Hey, even when there's data, you know, in that
Yeah.
example I gave the last year before we left it, there was a pre and post test, and we refused to do the cultural stuff. And our students did the best of all the other churches, the other church programs. And we did things here and there, but we didn't do it
Right.
Afrocentric. We didn't do that. And our kids scored higher. And I talked to some of the other churches and said, you should speak up. You know, y'all could have done, but you had good teachers. You didn't do well because you didn't have the time in the class. Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. Speak out, you know? So
Right.
even when the data is there, Deb, they don't insist. There's another reason why, and your approach
Right.
worked and all that. Whatever.
Right. They come up with some excuse because the money's too good to walk away from. I guess they don't want to,
Oh, yeah, it's a huge
they don't
program.
want to, there's a sense that if I turn down the money and I can't make it work, I'm going to get blamed for turning down the money.
Right.
And so you feel like, well, nobody ever got fired or disciplined because they took the money and they did the thing that they were told by the experts with the PhDs to do. So if it doesn't work, then I can't, you know, no one's going to blame me. Like they might blame something else, but they won't blame me. And it's really tragic because the kids are caught in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell the audience what you saw when you're talking about the culturally relevant pedagogy or culturally responsive pedagogy as it applies to math? How is that coming into the math classroom?
Well, they have this period. Well, this is what I know some public schools that are already implementing this stuff, and that's why I told you a little earlier that the framework it finally got published, but
Yeah.
we got to fall back to the lines. There's
Right.
some high schools already in LA that are doing this, and I know because they've come to me for tutoring. They don't know what they're not being taught, and I hear that in the classroom, in the math class they spend 15 or 20 minutes talking about current multicultural events that are going on they should be aware of and concerned about it. And during the summer, during the pandemic, it was all about the Floyd thing and all that, the Floyd murder and all that stuff. Uh, and then they get into the math and they do these math problems that are related to racial issues. And before they even get to the actual math content, there's never quite a lot of time. Then the homework's all on the content. And you build up their self-image. So now it's like a magical kind of thing. They can now do this math. And we're sitting there in the after school homework club going, what? And you know how we found out in that one school that's doing it, that's going all the way on it? We found out because just a simple thing. And we found out about a lot of schools of math, but really with this one. When we would get online with the students to help them in tutoring, this was during the pandemic, we were using whiteboard and showing them things and graphics boards we went out and purchased. And I said, does your teachers do that? And go, oh, no, they just show us a video. They're showing us a video during that part of the class that they're going to teach. They do these equity parts, and then they do a video. And that's math class. They haven't really done the math. It's showing them a video and pointed some things out, asked that they have it, and the kids are probably sleeping or disinterested, whatever. And now we're stuck with, how do I factor? And the test is going to be on that. And so we were using whiteboards and say, wow, that I would go to the next page. Wait, we need to take a picture of that. And I realized they'd never seen it. They'd never seen that written out for them on a board. And even during the pandemic, that's why you had that big digital divide during the pandemic, because the teachers weren't using these kind of resources if they were even showing up to their classes or not sending them to a video, which is
Right.
why it even got worse. Anyway, I think that's the
Yeah,
other thing.
but it what's frightening, and Adrian points this out here. She says, "Now I'm scared for the future of science,"
Oh yeah, we could do
because
a few minutes on that, but go ahead.
I was going to say, you're telling me they're going to test them anyway. They're going to test them on the math they're supposed to know, but they're not actually teaching the math. I don't know how
Not
anybody will.
always, not always. You
Okay.
get this once in a while. You get a great teacher. I gasp when I see it. I want to talk to that teacher almost. I want to hire him for my program. That's how I
Right.
got a couple of my teachers. I said,
Yeah.
"Who's your teacher?" And they told me, I said, "Oh my God." It's like one of them. I got this guy named Chuck. I called him up. Man, you need to teach with me.
Right.
And he thought I was crazy. And he best thing that ever happened. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
But it should be all of them, because for
Yes,
every kid that's sitting in a class without a teacher like that, they're at a deficit. They're being deprived what, in my personal opinion, is their right to their, free and appropriate education.
yes, they're
and
right.
and
Yes,
so but at some point the chickens are going to come home to roost.
yes,
You can't keep doing this. I mean, we've already seen our scores over the last, 50 years go like this. We now have 70% of our kids who are not proficient. They're graduating high school, not proficient at math, not proficient at reading. We got only about 22% of kids proficient in science, and
yes.
fewer than that proficient in civics.
Yeah, some of
And
these
that's the
cities it's
state.
really bad. Yeah,
And that's
and
pre-pandemic. That's
that's
2019
before the
scores.
pandemic. Right, right.
So and then they come up, there's all this newfangled stuff, which is really doubling down on the student directed stuff, which means not being taught. And they're doubling down on the discovery, the student will figure it out. And then, but I'm going to test you anyway. It would seem to me inside of 5 years, we're going to see those numbers go down to 20%.
Yeah, we already saw it. I don't know if you saw those Baltimore numbers post pandemic coming out.
Not
It
a
was
single
terrible.
kid.
Not a single kid in a couple of schools. It's terrible. And here in LA, they said the test scores went down 30%. They were already bad. I am so scared with the next quarter offers, and I just don't know. I think we got to fall back with alternatives to school. It's that bad. We got to have
Yeah.
alternatives. We're doing a prototype, like a beta test of a school without walls right now, but we're going to need to do something. It's bad, and we got to push politicians and school boards. Maybe we'll get to that. We got to do some things
Right.
quickly. It's critical. It is critical now.
Right. Yeah. It's not like a growing problem. We have reached
It's here.
crisis
It's
point.
gone. We're
And
gone.
and
Yeah.
the other myth that I would like to dispel, and you probably have seen it in your program, is that this is only a black and brown problem.
No.
That because what people are forgetting is, yes, there is a gap between black and brown and white students, but the proficiency of the white students has come down.
It has.
And
It
it's come
has.
down significantly.
Yes.
And you now have a giant gap between them and the Asian students, which is not going to hold on much longer, because they're in the same schools. And unless they keep going to enrichment and all kinds of things, then that's going to come down. The point being, like, when school gets political, whether it's math or any other thing, you can't achieve equal outcomes by lifting everybody this way. The only way you could do it efficiently and easily is this way. Get everybody down.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
seems to be what they're doing. It's like they're mowing the grass.
Yeah. I think you have something there, because if you think about even what happened in Northern Virginia, there certainly were prominent black parents and Asian parents involved, but there was a lot of white parents that would make some great points that brought my attention to it initially. Like when they brought up, I thought these people can't be telling. Oh wow, they're telling the truth. But they're bringing up the AP class thing. Those were white parents at first, and then the snowball started rolling. They said, "Hey, my daughter's not being taught irregular math," and what? Then I realized I saw black, I saw Asian, I said, "Oh, this is a parent issue, a parent teacher quality that came out during the pandemic." That's all.
Right. That's all. Just people got eyes on it.
They got eyes.
They got eyes on it, and I think they were under the impression that kids were going to school and being taught things, and then going home. And when the pandemic, they realized that what we were discussing, they were getting assigned things, which is a completely different thing. And when you've got kids who, this is where I think the disparities come into play, in my personal opinion. When you have kids who have other challenges, So, and that's doesn't go just to Black and brown, but it would be more, it's more prevalent in those communities where you don't necessarily have two parents in the household, as an example, or you've got, maybe nobody in the household was college educated. So they haven't had that level of learning they could turn around and teach, or maybe
Good
English
point.
isn't their first language,
Good point.
or, there's like a bunch of other little things that make it like a little bit harder, a little bit harder, a little bit harder. And when you add them all together, to the problem of, and the kid isn't being taught, like direct instructed, you take what was already a pretty challenging situation for a learner and you just make it harder.
Yes.
And that's what I've seen is, that it's not that somebody's out there intentionally being racist, that they're ironically
No, it's not that.
ignoring
No.
that the type of student who could do well in a self-directed situation where they're left to teach themselves a bunch of stuff, or to go home and have mom and dad teach them or help them, is a tiny, eensy beensy 1% of the population with extremely well-educated, involved parents who can afford tutoring and enrichment and eyes on and all kinds of stuff to help the
And
kid.
they come in different races too. But yeah,
They do, but
right.
it's still this tiny little
You're right.
percentage
You're
of the
right.
population.
No, you were right. You're right. And so you're so right about that. So the real issue is, that's an interesting thing you brought up. Is it the agenda first that they don't want to, and then there's the agenda? I think it's that, again, back to the point we started with. Both sides think they have the answer. It's just one side gets an agenda, more of an agenda approach to how to changing outcomes. And the other side says, let's get it. It's like they get to a point in the road, they both see something, and one goes one way, one goes the other. It's kind of, it's the oddest thing you ever saw. I saw one other thing like that in society, but I won't bring it up here. But that is a problem.
Yep. Everybody agrees that it's a problem. Everybody agrees we need to fix it.
Everybody says it. Even, the strongest CRT, even Max Kendi would agree. It's a problem. All right, it's a problem. But he would say, we got to change outcomes. We got to stand systemic racism. That's where we start to diverge.
And I guess I go back, because I'm a student of history, and so I go back in history to like Dunbar High School as an example.
What city?
In Washington, D.C.
I know that city. I know that.
Okay.
That
you know that
I know the school. I read books about it. Jason Riley's book and Shelby Steele's book. Go ahead.
Exactly.
Go ahead about talking about Dunbar.
Yeah, so you got Dunbar High School, 100% segregated school, and please nobody hear me saying we need to go back to segregation. That is not what I'm saying.
Don't put that in the chat, everybody. That's not. Listen to everything here. Go ahead.
I'm just saying that this was a school that was doing classical education. It was just saying we're going to teach the kids the way we teach the kids. They didn't teach them different because they were Black. They taught them the way they felt like the kids across town were being taught. Oh, P.S. They did better than the kids across town.
Right, and they ended up doing better.
My
dad went to Dunbar High School in that era. He was born in 1932. He went to Dunbar High School, and man, he always had a love for learning that translated to me. That's the one thing my parents agreed on was education board, and he was big into that. So go ahead. So Dunbar High School,
but that's it. I mean, when Walter Williams wrote, is in fact his very last piece that he wrote was about Dunbar, was about Baltimore and the tragedy of Black education, because people have this belief that it's from Jim Crow to now, like maybe a couple of things got better, but it was always bad. And it's like no there was a renaissance of extraordinarily highly educated Black Americans.
Thank goodness there was, or I wouldn't be here. Thank goodness.
I mean, it was just taking off like a rocket, because if you think about it logically, you deprive people literally of an education for 100 years, whatever. And then you say, okay, you can go get educated now. People are going to grab that. They are going to grab that, run with it, because like Frederick Douglass taught us, learning to read makes a man unfit to be a slave. I mean, that's what he learned.
That's right.
And that's a fact. Learning to read, learning math, all of that. You can't be somebody else's, you're not going to be subservient to somebody else when you have skills, when you can do these things. Even if somebody tries to get in your way, you can go around them, over them, whatever, because you can do it yourself. Like you said, with James Brown. And what I'm seeing in the math framework, and I'm seeing in some of the rhetoric, even this article has this poor, pitiful them approach.
It's kind of hidden in that article. Yeah, it's there. It's that assumption in the writing.
Right. It's an assumption that it's kind of like, the reason people aren't learning is we need to change everything. And, that was instead of saying, no, we need to go back to what was because it worked.
Yes,
It
it's a
worked.
good
It worked
part to
with
that.
every
Yeah,
culture of people, including immigrants who came to this country and didn't speak a word of English.
totally.
So, okay, moving to the next steps. We've got the revised draft framework is
I
out
know. I know.
today. And you mentioned before we came on live, you said, okay, we got to go to plan B or what, we got to get organized. Explain to the audience what you advocate for parents, for concerned educators to do when the state or, someone hands down some kind of a framework like this, where you look at it and you go, time out. No, this
Here it
ain't going to
comes.
work.
Here it comes. Yeah.
Right. So what's the plan?
I think it's threefold, and I've already started working in all three areas. I think I've started training parents to be activists, more activists about their children. And I'm getting eighth and ninth grade parents involved right now. I'm probably going to have my first town hall in about a month. Just go to my website, everyone. You can find out about that. We'll post about it in a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely need a town hall. We need to start talking about this and start making some noise here in front of LUSD and the Long Beach School District. I sat in on an online meeting and I saw them just out in the open ordering a new curriculum based on this critical race theory and these things, even before the framework. And I said, oh, here it comes, because they know the framework's going to pass. Although I worked hard to stop it. So I think we need to organize our parents around ideas of improving learning. And then the second thing we need to do, and this is the tough one, because I'm a little old for it now, but we need to do something about identifying candidates that can run on these school boards and get on these school boards. And I'm looking at two people right now here in Long Beach. I think they should look at it. They're former teachers, and they got to be people who will speak strength in front of the union, because the unions get the school boards they want. And
Mm-hmm.
we gotta also make the point. As point 2.5 is get parents to understand there's a difference between the teachers and the union. The union leadership, excuse me, has a different agenda many times than the teachers. It's just the teachers are scared to speak up of what's going to happen to them career wise.
Yep.
And because a lot of them are leaving right now in LA Unified. There's 13% teaching positions wide open, and
Mm-hmm.
they're shorting subs too. Because a lot of these teachers just left when they saw what's going on with the union. And so we need to teach parents that just because you're standing for your student being taught, that doesn't mean you're against the idea of a teacher. Give the teachers what they need to fight back. A lot of them have privately told me, they've come to me. Get this, on my program, I have at least 40 LA Unified teachers send their kids to me for enrichment. And a
That
lot
says something,
and
doesn't it?
about half of them, they have kids in the LA Unified. So they
Yeah.
send them to me for enrichment. And I'm like, very interesting.
Right.
So they know. And I've actually asked them, I hear you guys got to teach this way in your class. What are you going to do? Well, what can we do? Pray for us. And we need to give them the strength to push back too. But they'll get it if they see we're pushing back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I need to see parents involved. I need to see us going for school board positions. I need to see us organizing in fathers groups. This big thing, I'm trying to get involved with fathers groups and get them to see that this is a threat. Fathers need to stand up for their children. When fathers stand up, it's going to be over in the Black community and the brown community. So I think
Mm-hmm.
we need to stand up. Those are the three things that need to happen. And that's what I'm going to lead out on the next part of this year. Now that we know what's happening with it. I told Michael that, my buddy there in the Save Math, I told him that, that's the next, I'm falling back already to those battle lines and,
Mm-hmm.
and getting
I
my
think that's
parents trained.
smart. I really do, because it's becoming pretty clear that going after this like head on is not really effective. The parents have power,
Yes,
and
that taught us, the last year taught us that.
that's right, with the Loudoun County and different places around the country, in Texas and so forth, that when the parents unify and parents raise their voices and say, like, this is not what we want. And like I said, that's kind of what I try to do, is just educate the parents, because a lot of times they'll know like something's not right, but I don't know what it is. Like, I don't really
Yeah,
know.
and
And
help them see what it is. Yeah,
yeah, like and like I said, it's the first shock is that there isn't teaching going on. that's the first shock. They're like, wait, well, then what are they doing all day? Like they're not teaching. They're doing a lot of other like circle time and, discussing their feelings and
Oh
talking
yeah.
about current events and all kinds of stuff. But if you thought that they were like the teacher was up at the front of the room on the board doing, this is factoring, that's not happening in a lot of classes. I'm not saying every single one, but
It's happened a lot.
one way, what would be a way that a parent could do a quick check of their kids to just kind of gauge like what they are doing, what could they look for in their kids' work or their kids' homework, Chromebook, etc. What should they be looking for to see what's happening? Because the kid won't necessarily be able to talk to them about it.
Yeah, I hate to refer to a movie I just saw last night with my wife on Turning Red. So I've been thinking a lot about this. Every parent should see that movie, by the way, and get past the first 15 minutes. You'll be all right. All right.
Okay.
There's a meaning to it. Just get past it.
Okay.
And the point is that kids don't like to talk to their parents about stuff. They have this respect for their teachers. Their teachers will swear they don't have. But nevertheless, you can still find out. You start looking at, let's see, your notes. Are you taking notes? If they're not even taking notes, try to get things you have to talk to the teacher about, and keep showing up. Keep showing up. Because you're giving that teacher strength that someone cares. Because a lot of teachers tell me, my parents don't care what I teach. I would push back, Deacon, but they don't care what I teach. And that's something we got to change. So I think parents are going to have to, let's see, your notebook. You're going to don't ask open-ended questions. Parents, stop asking, how did school go? They'll say, all right, okay. Start asking questions that demand an answer. How did you do in the factory? How'd you teach you that? Were you on the board? But get to those notes. Look at that homework. Are they able to actually finish their homework? Hey, what homework did you get today in math? And you start bridging out the other classes too, especially these AP classes, but that's not why we're here. But right. Math, for sure, you can look at those notes. You can ask them open-ended questions. And every time you find something you didn't get an answer on you needed, hey, that's my weekly meet with the teacher. You want to be like, when you go up to the school to talk to them, they're like, oh, Lord, here she come now.
That was me.
Oh, my God. Here come that.
That was me. I was that parent.
Hey, Doris, is that lady filming woman? Oh, yeah, that's her.
Oh, they hated me so much.
All right. And hi, Miss Filman, when you come in,
Yeah.
I think
the problem is that, and I'll warn so many parents.
You have a life.
They don't, when you become that parent, even if you're sweet as sugar and you try really hard to stay, civil and everything, if they have an agenda, like if the principal and the people there have an agenda that they're committed to, it won't matter what you say, what you do. They're going to shut you out. They're going to make it about you personally. So my advice then is, if you pick up on any of that, if you pick up on, this whole like, well, this is what we're doing for cultural relevance, and it's really important for our anti-racism and equity plan. Like, so if you're getting this kind of
like them, by the way,
if you're getting this word salad kind of answer, now you need to go back and get reinforcements. You can't come back again alone.
Let's talk about reinforcements. Excellent point. Let's talk about reinforcements. Number one, I'll give the not so obvious one first. Shout out to Avery, my buddy out here in California. He thinks I don't pay attention to him, but actually I do. So there you go, Avery. I see you. I'm watching you. He said something about suing. Some parents of means, and I know a group I'm connected with in Long Beach now. They get a little steam. There's some pretty wealthy lawyers in there. Somebody might get sued. Hint. I'm putting that out there. Okay, so set that aside. Yeah. I think you said bringing somebody with you. I just thought about that. The other thing is, I go back to it. These fathers, I need you fathers that are sitting there thinking that's the education department, that's my wife. Well, we need the CEO involved. We need the COO, the co-manager, whatever 100%. Y'all are. We need you walking there. We're just sitting there. You just sit there. Like in that Godfather scene, you just sit there and let your wife go. Or even if it's not your wife, it's just your son's mother. Why don't you show up? Just show up.
Exactly.
Take an hour out of school every 2 months. Just show. I got a couple. I always have some questions, like in class. You always have questions. Parents always have interactions you have to have with that teacher, especially in math, because there's a lot of chance to pull the wool over your eyes. Because all of us are not great in math. So you need to, that's the number two, you bring that father in there, whether it's a husband or not. Men, we need to get involved. I know some of you all listen to this. You need to get involved. Look past the problems you're having with your parents' mother and get in there and work for the kids. Your
Yeah.
parents' mother. Yeah, your kid's mother.
Yeah.
And get parents' mother. Look at me. I get in trouble with mothers-in-laws now. Oh my God. Ooh, and I can
No,
always
but
tell off my mother-in-law. Come on now.
it
Okay.
is so true. And you know, even if you're feeling a little insecure because like you didn't personally go to college, or like you don't remember math, or you weren't a great math student, the thing to remember is they're advancing the argument that they're the experts and you're not, right? And I think you can use
Right. We
that to
know
your
what's
advantage.
best. We know what's
Right.
best.
You can use that to your advantage as follows. If they can't teach you, the adult, if they can't explain it to you, how are they explaining it to your kid? So, what I mean by that is you go in and you
That's
say,
it.
look, I admit, not a teacher, not an expert, but I'll
How are
tell
you
you
teaching
what,
that?
I'm a good listener and I'm pretty smart. And so, here's what I'd like you to do because I need to be able to help my kid do well in your class. Explain it to me.
How
Show
you teach?
me,
Yeah. How are you teaching that?
how are you teaching that to my child? Teach it to me. Show me how you're doing it. Because then when I understand it, I can explain it to you. If they can't explain it to you, guaranteed they can't explain it to your kid.
And they should be able to. So good. Also, Deb, they should be able to explain how they approach the topic too.
Mm-hmm.
How do you teach factoring?
Yep.
Well, I sent them to these videos. No, no. How do you teach factoring?
Exactly.
And then at least you know as a parent. Let's say you find out they're not going to be taught it properly. At least you know what you have to do as a parent at home. Okay, I got to find
Exactly.
somebody that will actually supplement that teaching. And I remember that to tell my school board member, hey, this teacher's not doing the teaching. You keep wearing the school board. I think parents need to invest 2 hours a week to get this turnaround, maybe an hour and a half, maybe even an hour. If they have a second parent with them, they can divide the labor.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to spend a little bit of time with it each week,
Mm-hmm.
let them, so the parents know they're there. The other thing I just thought about this is if you can get 2 or 3 other parents to do the same thing in your school, it'll make a big difference. They'll realize
Absolutely.
we're going to have to look at every time they do a lesson, they're thinking about you. Oh,
Right.
is this going to be an issue?
Now, one thing I thought about though is if you look at most state standards, and the California standards are no exception, they are very vague. You know, they're these kind of like
Very.
it's really vague. So as a parent, if you're trying to say, okay, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna grab the state standards and then I'm gonna see how the work they're doing, my kids doing each week or whatever is kind of, or each semester is aligning with this. Good luck.
Yeah,
Because
because they'll say, well, I covered this over here. Yeah, that's actually another good point. Now, I use the standards to know what in the summer, the areas I want to teach, but I decide how I'm going to bring them out. So that's the
right.
whole area of how they're doing it. It's not in the standards. Look, I was an aerospace engineer for years. I won't belabor this, but we used to have a thing called requirements. And the requirements were here's how you're supposed to, the device is supposed to work, the outputs and everything, right?
Right.
Now you're testing my ability to teach. What? Look, see what you got me doing. But then there had to be a procedure written to match the requirement, right? I think a lot of times there's not procedures written,
Correct.
or they're very they don't look at the procedure. Or we're not really testing that. We're testing A, B, C, and D, never X, Y, and Z, and the test is on A through Z.
Right.
And then that's why my students are struggling because you're not.
Exactly.
You told them you're going to cover and gave some kind of ethereal examples, but you
Yeah.
didn't actually have a procedure because probably you didn't know how to teach it, or you just didn't have time. You didn't know how to balance your time in class, budget your time to cover it. Of course,
Right.
they would say, "Well, it's all these students' fault and all that." Well, this is where the unions will come in. They should be making the environment for that teacher easier, not just getting them more money. But don't get
Right.
me started on that one.
Right. Well, that's a whole other show. But I think it's really important though because you know, I personally have suggested to parents that they, rather than looking at the state standards of what the state is saying the kid needs to know during this year, or whatever, they should find other resources. There are books. There's a book that I've used
Right.
as a homeschooler called Learning Year by Year. And it does give a pretty good idea of in this grade, these are basically what you should learn. Go avail yourself of a resource like that is not necessarily specific to your state, but at least will give you 90% of the actual content that a
Absolutely.
child in that rough age range ought to be learning before they go to the next thing, or even what does a student need to know before doing algebra? What are the core math skills they need to have before they can take algebra 1, and get that from yourself. Amazon, somewhere, find a good resource for that. And you start the year and you need to align that and even make FaceTime with this teacher and say, okay, this is what I personally am expecting out of this year, because it's sixth grade, because it's fifth grade, whatever.
Right.
So like you said, how are you teaching it? How are you doing
Pretty
it?
effective.
If you go by the state standards,
Mm-hmm.
it's just too vague. And what's happening too is a lot of teachers are going to online resources like Common Core, blah, 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 this, that number. Here we go. They pull a worksheet, they give it to the kid. So they're not doing the teaching. They're pulling a worksheet or they're pulling a lesson online, and then they're checking their box and going, I did it.
Yeah, and the teachers get books and materials from the state that reinforce their approach. And again, everybody means well. The state means, well, let's control what they teach and make it something that's very equitable and fair. And the teachers go, oh, wow, great. This is where I'm going to go with it. And they even have the test form and everything sometimes. And
and then it feels idiot proof, right? People go like, this is how we make sure they're doing the same things. But these are your children. You're not looking for plug and play education.
No.
You want the best they can get for your, dollars or whatever. Obviously you're paying taxes and everything. So I'm sure most parents are like, well, I guess I wouldn't expect it to be the same as the high end, prep school. But does it follow it should be mediocre?
No.
No, of course not. If you're paying upwards of 20 grand a kid, which in California is pretty much what most districts are spending.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
That's a lot of money. That's a heck of a lot of money. And you should start behaving like a consumer of this product, or they're never going to treat you like you are.
Yes. I think the final thing in that list of things they can do at their level, it's another movement that I'm connected with, and I'm actually now going to spend more time on it since I see where we are on the framework, and a couple other things they've decided in Sacramento also about culturally relevant education in general. This is the last straw to me. So I think also to a nice student choice movement. I think the proposition that's on the ballot here, where they give the parents the money to decide on where they go to school. It's not really a voucher. It's different than that. But point is, there's ways to get at this choice issue that can, even if it loses, putting pressure on the process to get better for students. And some parents just need to pull them out and educate them on their own. And there's lots of great things during the pandemic that developed. Shout out to the pandemic again. Because you developed the California, there's some great alternatives.
Fastest growing group of homeschoolers, Black and brown students.
Fastest growing. It's crazy. I just read a book
13,
on that.
I think it's up to 13%.
Yeah. It was only 3% going into the pandemic.
These parents are doing what I think all parents should do, and saying, I'm going to take ownership of this. I'm not leaving it up to chance. People can tell me all day long they want the best for my kid. They want to help my kid succeed, blah, blah, blah. They want to liberate my child, whatever. No one's going to do it as well as you. No one's going to see to it getting done as well as you. That's not to say that that's the solution for you, but all these other suggestions that we're making to get involved and avail yourself of resources. I think we've got here a couple of comments. Robbie, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, says, as parents, we don't even know textbook slides are not enough.
That's right.
And then says, just give names of the topics covered on a week-to-week basis, give extra resources. And not every parent can themselves help, but they can get resources for their kids. So that's
another great suggestion. Well, I want to thank you in a way, Deb, here, because I think that's going to be my next video. Is 10 things you can do right now. Now, let the launching point be the fact that this thing passed, and we can sit here and and
Yeah.
equivocate on how bad. And I'll do another video on that. I'll tell them. But
That
this
would
you
be a
need to do
public
right now.
service. I'm sure people would love that because we need to get, keep repeating it, get more people. And I want to, as a
And I'm
final
gonna
thing,
push that. I'm gonna push that town hall I mentioned. So
yeah.
I'm really gonna do. That's gonna be a lot. I think a
And
lot of
that's
people in
on your website
LUSU.
right here,
It's
right?
gonna be. It's gonna be on there within 2 hours. As soon as I get out of
Okay.
this interview, I'm gonna call my webmaster up. We're gonna put a page up. We're gonna
Okay.
put some pressure from the outside with that.
Okay.
And that's gonna be one of our first in-person things we do too.
Okay, great. Well, I'll be looking for that because I
Yeah,
want to
yeah, yeah. You
broadcast
know,
that out to everybody.
sure.
I think because I think that can serve as a model for parents around the country, not just in California. As California goes, so goes the country, guys. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's no other way to say it. That's our nation's largest state.
Yes.
You've got a tremendous number of students who are going to grow up and go out to work in jobs, and we got to fill up our STEM careers with people. So we can't take chances with this. Even if you live on the other side of the country, we need to care what's happening in California. And I've seen it with my own eyes how something will happen in California and it's not even 6 months. It's in New Jersey, it's in New York, it's in Connecticut, it's in other
Mm-hmm.
states,
Mm-hmm.
or even North Carolina where I live.
Oh
So
yes.
it's
Mm-hmm.
considered a kind of a standard bearer in a lot of respects.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why I've been keeping an eagle eye on it, and I'm going to be really interested to see what you have to say about the new draft, which I know you got to go read now.
Yeah, I'm one thing I'm gonna do today too. But
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna. I might do the video first to let them know I know it came out,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
tell the parents what we do next, and then send us like a little signal to these parents I've already told what's going on. We need to now start pushing to give that panel that community forum is going to be huge. We
Right.
talk about way math and stuff. I'm gonna have teachers there too that aren't
Right.
scared to talk about it.
But we've got to push back on some of these myths, and that, black and brown kids need easier standards, fewer tests, less homework. Myth. Totally
Mm-hmm.
false.
No, no, no.
Um,
Bring it on.
that
Bring it on. But teach us.
math is boring if it's teacher led. False. Students do a better job teaching it to themselves and discovering and becoming great
We
minds when
didn't
they
have time to
discover it.
talk about that one, but that one is very disturbing to me. There's a
Yeah.
magnet school here that does that, and the students, I get a lot of students from our program from there,
Right.
and have
So, I
peers
mean, go
tutoring
ahead.
them.
You got a little bit of time. Just let them know that
Yeah,
something called inquiry math, right, is what it's called.
yeah. When you have these peer students that are given, associate gurus, but they're really not because they don't know how to teach, and the students are scared to go to them, and they're not learning in small groups. And the student teacher just sits up, reading a book or whatever. I don't understand that, and you see that in AP classes a lot, which is AP calculus all the time, and that's very disturbing to me.
Right.
Uh, so this inquiry approach is not the way to do it. It's not the way out. We got to do the work. I think if you need to bring in people who work under the teacher that do that work of teaching the math, I see a couple of Long Beach schools are doing that with the beta test with success. But let's widen that program.
Bring back the professional
yes,
teacher,
bring back the professional
whether it's
teacher.
math or science or whatever else. Like bring
Yeah.
back these people who are, experts in their field, and create incentives to get them into teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, whether it's somebody who's been in their career for a while and they'd like to take a couple years and go teach, and that's their kind of like a community thing that they're doing, make that easier for them to do. Make it easier for people just starting out to get loan forgiveness or something, but they, on their way to Silicon Valley.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
I want to go to Silicon Valley, but you know what? Hey, guess what? We'll pay for your school if you come teach for a couple of years. And again, not everyone can teach just because you're a math genius, but find those people who want to do it, who have the communication skills, and think, I might like to teach, but I got loans. I got to go get a job making 6 figures, So we got to create incentives to get people who are passionate about these subjects, who are good at talking about them and presenting them to kids, and get them into the classroom. Because if there's one thing I've learned at working with children is they respond to your passion. If you love your subject and you're excited by your subject, they will respond to that. Any kid will. Even a kid who's not that good at it is going to aspire to do better because they see the fire in your belly and they want to emulate that.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's the truth. That's the truth totally. And I'd like that you add this part in. What can we do to fix it? Because so often I go to these working groups and I'm trying my best to make. I'm telling you right now, my town hall, or wherever I'm gonna call it, is going to be loaded with suggestions like this, loaded with things that the schools need to do. That's how you put pressure on them, I think.
Yep.
And then we're going
Yep.
to get one of these papers in the city, in Long Beach, LA, to cover it because
Yep.
they need to. I think some of these smaller papers would cover. I know the Times won't because they're in the back pocket of the school board and things like
Right.
that. But
And the
there's
unions.
and the unions. I didn't want to say that, but it's true.
It's true.
But it's true. Again, remember, there's a difference. Those who are teachers, God bless you. There's a difference between you as a teacher and your union leadership. And it's true. Call me, get to me back channel. I'll show you.
Right.
The leadership of the union is not always in the best interest of my parents' children. A lot of they're in my program, so you know that. So
That's so
there you
true.
go.
Well, John, this has been really enlightening, and I hope that the audience learned a lot too. I learned a
I
lot,
hope so.
and I'm really excited for your video and all of your great suggestions and everything you're going to do. I'll be following along. I wish you the greatest of success because it affects, like I said, affects all of us. And for those of you looking to find out more about the town hall or any of the other pushback that's going on, the link is right there on the screen.
Just
West
watch those banners.
AEP.
Those banners at the top. I think it's Save Math is right on one of the banners. Just
Yeah.
go across and click on those banners.
Yep.
And
On his website.
And it also has my video channel on there too. Lots of great videos on
Yep.
this and other topics that will help you.
Excellent. Thanks everybody for coming. Please like, share, and comment on the video to get more
Absolutely.
people to see it. And I wish you all a great afternoon. Thanks for coming, everyone.